And I just called the sheriff and you forgot. I'm not kidding you. It's got it. He's on his way, though. So this is good. Oh, boy. Apparently that dream on Saturday was a longer list. I stopped after our two guests on the radio weren't going to be here.
Done here now?
I got to catch the sheriff. He's going to talk tonight. Oh, okay. Hi, Sheriff. You want level there or just give him a handout? You're all set, okay? I just wanted some money.
How's that for coverage?
Okay, he said he didn't use the siren. I'm like, what good is a siren if you don't use the siren? Are there rules about the siren? How would they know?
Well, have you ever seen the commercial, closed circuit, professional driver, don't try this at home? Oh. And I wish they made a gas station because I get the call from Aaron. Hey, you going to be here? Well, I'm already here. I was at another meeting. No, over at the tea party. Oh, got to get going. See you later. Bye. And then look at my gas gauge, and it has a tongue sticking out. Hey, we're running on fumes. So then I have to pull into the gas station and try and do a NASCAR pit stop, but it was over 18 seconds, and then still make it here. So how's everybody doing tonight? Well, let's see. What was it? 3 weeks ago when Assemblyman Nielsen and Brian Jones were here, right? Well, since then, we still don't have a state budget. No vote for an special election to go before the voters in June. That means in June 30th, some VLF extension, vehicle license fees, expires. And that is about $506 million statewide. For the sheriff's office, it's about $1.5 million. So we were looking at about, with other county costs and stuff, about almost a $2 million shortfall. Well, the good thing, we worked out a deal with the county that right now we're not going to take a hit for any more layoffs or anything, but they had to come up with some money out of their savings account, so that was a good thing. They did that for public safety, but it still doesn't address the issue for other law enforcement and public safety agencies statewide. Reading Police will get hit. Orange County Sheriff, that equates to about $30 million for her. So there's a lot of impacts coming. I did hear that perhaps the Republicans might consider an extension of that June 30th until a special election if they vote for one, because the governor needs about 2 votes in the Assembly and 2 votes in the Senate for Republican votes to have a 2/3 majority to make a special election or to pass any extensions for VLF or taxes or anything. I know we're all fed up with taxes and we pay too much because it's that time of year again. April 15th is coming up and the CPAs are burning the midnight oil, and then you're either writing a check or seeing how much you may get back. And that check is often way too much to write all the time. So let's see, what other impacts are we have looming? There is SB 610, and where is Mark? There he is, way in the back. You know what AB 610 is? There was some changes to CCW laws. And they wanted, the legislators, wanted some special assistance, don't know a better word for it right now, but basically, hey, I'm a legislator and I think I should have special privileges to get whizzed right through my CCW permit process. And basically, me being an elected official is good cause enough to have a concealed weapon. And so, of course, law enforcement, we had some exception with that because it basically puts them on a pedestal, and why should you get special attention just for being a legislator? And they did take that wording out of it recently, and so basically they took that out, but then they're asking that sheriffs, which I don't have a problem with, if we deny a permit, we should give a reason because right now I don't have to give a reason other than the big old no stamp or denied stamp, and which I don't do that too often. So where I'm going to support that bill, because I think there should have, hey, why we're denying a permit, and it allows a person to know exactly why. It also saves them some money, because right now they usually require that you go out and get the class first, which is that you go to a Jones's Ford or some other gun places to get your training so you can have a CCW. Well, that's like $180. And then if you fill out the application and get denied, that's a lot of money. Between the schooling training process and the application process, first-time CCWs are around $320, $340, and that's non-refundable. So that's a big chunk of money. So they're asking that, hey, fill out the application. If you pass the background and you say yes, then go get the training. And that makes sense, and it saves money, because most people don't have $180 to throw around.
Talk about why our county CCW versus some of the others.
Oh, Aaron, how many, I'll put it out for a poll. We'll have a little auction here. How many CCW holders do you think there are in Shasta County, approximately? You can do a shout out. Here, 3,000. 100. 15,000. 30,000. Boy, I wish this was an auction. Actually, the $3,000 mark was pretty close. We got about 2,500 permits in Shasta County, and that's a higher per capita rate than many others. San Francisco County, guess how many? 3. Somebody's been doing their homework here. It's about 3 for San Francisco County. LA County, population of several million, 400 permits. Pardon me? How many don't have permits and carry? That's an unknown, or a dark number that we call it. And most of those are criminals, because your local gangbanger, dope dealer isn't going to go down and apply for a CCW permit because they're carrying large sums of cash and drugs and they need a CCW. They're just going to do it. And most of them are convicted felons, so they're going to have that. But we have about 2,300 here. I think Kern County is the leader with about 4,000 in their county, but they're also a much bigger, more populated county as well. And I look for it as if a person is reasonable, responsible, law-abiding, and would like one, that's their choice. And if they choose not to, that's also their choice, but not to carry it, I'll get to your question, Bob, not to carry it illegally. And so basically a good cause would be to comply with the law, personal defense, and protection of others. And that's good enough for me. And then they have to renew every 2 years. They can have about 3 guns in their permit. Bob?
1979, they changed the CCW laws for police officers retiring because they have a lifetime rule. Is the new law pull that out?
They have not. Bob's statement was basically in '79 they changed the law where if you're an honorably retired peace officer in California, you could have a lifetime CCW, and that still is in effect today. And then a few years ago, they passed H.R. 218, which allowed peace officers, retired and currently working, to, if you went through a qualification course by the issuing authority, chief or sheriff, then you could carry nationwide concealed as well. And that's still in force. There's a couple of cities, Washington, D.C. and New York, that do take exception to it, and they gave all law enforcement fair warning that said if you're a cop and you carry in our city, you better have your I's dotted and T's crossed, or else you could end up either being arrested or having your gun seized, or both. So that was a big concern.
Yes, there's many states that on the CCW you don't have to list any weapons on it, but here you have to.
In some states, the question was, in some places you don't have to list weapons on your permit, and that's correct. California is required that you list those weapons. Unfortunately, or you can look at it as fortune depending on what side of the aisle you're on, those weapons then become registered, and then it's a way of tracking weapons. And you can have the good thing if you had your weapon stolen but didn't remember the serial number, we can run a weapons registered to check and come up with that serial number to enter it into the computer system. And the state also only allows 3 weapons on the permit, but generally if the person makes a request to me and they want to add a 4th, most of the time I do that as well. And they just add a 4th weapon on there, a small fee with that.
You change the model of rifle system out the other, if you only trade.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
You have a specific pistol, like full rifle, something like that, you change another pistol. Would that be an old registration?
The question was, if you had a pistol on there and decided to change it out for another one, is that a whole new registration? It's just a transfer fee. It's a $10 fee to add or subtract a weapon.
Besides deputizing people, does the sheriff have any way of putting together a militia?
Not necessarily a militia, but the question was, other than deputizing, does the sheriff have a way of putting together a militia? A militia, no, but deputies, yes. And technically, you know, our state was founded in 1849, 50. Shasta County was in 1850 as well. And still on the books is posse comitatus, which means that I can enlist the assistance of a citizen or request the assistance of a citizen, just like in the old Western movies where the sheriff says, hey, let's get together and let's go out and look for this desperado, and they all ride off in a big old cloud of dust on their horses. It still exists today on the books, and it's actually a misdemeanor crime to disobey the order of a sheriff or deputy sheriff to not assist them. So if I'm like out in the parking lot getting in a fight with someone, I says, hey, Bob, come and help me. And he says, hey, I'm going to take a long walk off a short pier. Technically, that's a misdemeanor. But in today's society, you know, we have to go through to be an officer, 700 hours of training, and that gives us just enough to, like, graduating from the academy. Then we go through several hundred hours of training to make a good street cop, and then you need probably a year or 2 of experience on top of that. And we also have the ability to call for mutual aid. I can assist, say, hey, Reading PD, can you come help me? Anderson PD, can you come help me? If it gets bigger, I can put out a region request. We're in Region 3 with about 12 other counties, and they can send some officers. If it gets bigger, they can request other regions or the entire state to come here. And won't forget you, and I won't forget you, Mark. 1991, we had a sheriff's deputy murdered in Bernie, California. We put out a mutual aid request. We had over 500 officers from as far away as Oregon, Nevada, and Southern California here aiding in a 5-day manhunt for the 2 people. And we successfully found them, captured them, went to trial. One sits on death row, one sits in prison for life without possibility of parole.
Well, yeah, I have 2 real quick ones. Like if you get posse together, what if you don't have a horse?
You can always fire up your Harley Davidson or your car. Two questions he had. One was, what if you didn't have a horse? But I'm not aware of any sheriff actually using posse comitatus anytime in modern times here. And mainly a lot of it's because of the liability, danger, not being able to background people, carry guns and all that. And then his second question was, what about elected official carrying in federal buildings? That's some places that CCWs can't carry is in federal buildings. Even myself, I can't go into the courthouse in Sacramento, the Eastern District, and carry. I have to put my gun away as well. And then also many state buildings, like in the courthouses, you can't carry. And then you had one more question? That was it. We still have a ride-along program. You have to sign up. You have to get vetted, which basically we make sure that you're not a felon or a crazy person riding with our deputies. But, and it's for safety purposes. I'll get back to you, the lady right there.
Can you carry into the courthouse when you're ready?
No. Can't carry knives, can't carry a gun.
And who pays for mutual aid when these people come to law? Do we have to pay it, or is that just the general?
For the straight time officer's salary and overtime, that's borne by the agency that is sending the officers. The requesting agency has to basically pay for food and lodging of those officers. And then Mark, way in the back.
Yeah, is it legal to form a militia, and if so, are there guidelines, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, thankfully. So I don't know. I don't know if you go to militia.com and get up the rules and regs. There are people that call themselves militia, and I know back in the 1700s when our founding fathers were here, it was basically a group of people that came together and made themselves a militia. Some gave them a name, some they didn't, and then they formed it, but that was, a few hundred years ago. So I honestly don't know. I'll come to you.
I came to CCW, and I have a shoulder hole inside my jacket, and I raise my arm to get something, the jacket falls open, and that becomes visible, and people see that. Am I broken a lot?
The question was, he's a CCW holder, he has a shoulder holster, and he raises a hand at a Tea Party meeting to ask a question, and the gun is exposed. Is that a violation of law? No. It might cause some anxiety for some people, might call law enforcement, but you're able to carry concealed, and that's not a problem. Good question, because it ain't going to be me. The question was, if all the people in Washington, D.C. and the Institution of Higher Learning and Legislation made an order to ban semi-automatic weapons, who's going to go out and collect all those things? And I seriously doubt with, I want to say there's something like 6 million gun owners in the United States. There's something like 2 million NRA members, and most of them probably own more than one gun. I know I do. So I seriously doubt that they would see that. The way that they're going to go about restricting our rights is restricting ammunition, restricting reloading components, and those parts. They had in California a serialization bill, which you had to have make the manufacturers put a serial number on the projectile, the bullet, and the casing as well, and they had to match. And when you form them together, it becomes a cartridge. And they also, Governor Schwarzenegger passed a bill for micro-stamping, which would also put a raised lettering numbering system on the firing pin of a weapon, so then when it strikes the primer of a cartridge, it would leave it the indentation mark, but then there would be a microscopic serial number there that would match the firearm. That's there now, but they don't have the technology to put that micro-stamping on there. The bullet manufacturer said, hey, if you pass this serialization law, great. We just won't ship to California. And then that would make more criminals out of law-abiding citizens trying to import or smuggle ammunition into the state. And then they said if we did, it'd cost you about $5 a round, which was also very difficult. So they're going to make more controls, make it more difficult, rather than outright ban the Second Amendment. And then 2 recent court decisions this last year, thank goodness the Supreme Court in their wisdom, under Chicago v. McDonald and Heller v. the District of Columbia, basically found for a citizen's Second Amendment rights. And so the Second Amendment has been upheld twice by the Supreme Court as of recent.
How do you feel about loaded open carry?
The question was, how do I feel about loaded open carry? Unloaded open carry. You can do some research on that with opencarry.org, and basically it remains legal in California to open carry. What I'm doing right now is open carrying loaded. And so in California, you can open carry loaded in California in the unincorporated area or the county area, and you have to open carry unloaded in municipals, incorporated cities. So they were in the city of Reading. John Q. Citizen could open carry legally as long as his gun was not loaded. So for a semi-automatic weapon, no loaded magazine, nothing in the chamber, but they could have a magazine on their belt, but just not in the gun.
You'd have to have your wife 3 spaces behind you.
No, you don't have to. He said you have to have your wife 3 paces behind you. You can actually carry the magazine on your person, but it can't be in the weapon. And he asked me how I felt about that. The person is complying with the law, and they are following the law. And there's been a couple of bills. One failed last year. There's another one working its way through the legislature that's trying to ban open carry. Most of the time it does solicit a response. If somebody sees somebody carrying a gun in a barber shop, and we have to respond to it, and they've had a number of open carry parties, or if you will. They might like go to a park and have cake and ice cream, and everybody's open carrying legally. So that has caused some angst in the different communities they've held that. Sir?
The day passed the law, I heard that they did it January 1st, that you had to.
Go ahead, I'm listening. I'm flagging Terry for a drink of water.
It's not a serious, it's not required.
Oh, I didn't say that I was going to start drinking, so.
That it required a thumbprint on purchase.
That bill was AB 962, which banned the internet sales of ammunition, and then also required you, when you purchased handgun ammunition, a fingerprint and a signature. And for those of us, seems like the majority of us in this room, I was a kid, but back in the 1960s, it was after the assassination of President Kennedy, that was a law in California. Because I remember when my dad and I would go to the sporting goods place and buy ammunition, he had to sign for it. And did it prevent crime back then? Nope. Did they do anything with all these tons of records? Not to my knowledge. Again, Gary the gangbanger isn't going to leave his thumbprint and his signature when he's getting his handgun ammunition. He's going to get probably a straw purchaser that can do it legally and get it, or they're going to steal it from somebody's house, or they're going to smuggle it in from another state, out-of-state purchase. That bill was it was signed into law by Governor Schwarzenegger, and then a Fresno Superior Court found the law constitutionally vague because handgun ammunition crosses over between long guns, rifle, and pistols, such as a .22 long rifle can be in a pistol and a rifle. A .45 long Colt can be in a pistol and a rifle. So it was constitutionally vague, and now they have SB 144, I believe, that is trying to close up those loopholes right now.
I've heard something about a 1898 law, I think it's older than that. You don't have to have a registered or anything like that.
I'm not sure of your question. In 1898.
They got 1898 or older, does not have to be registered.
Oh, he said he heard that the gun 1898 or older does not have to be registered. I don't think it's that old, and I don't know the exact date on that, but that would fall under a curio, an antique, vintage firearm. Firearms before 1969, before the Firearms Act of 1969, weren't registered. You didn't have to go through a waiting period, didn't have to fill out dealer paperwork and stuff. So if you have some old guns in your gun safe, and I have some of those in mine, those were my dad's guns, they're not registered anywhere. But for me to legally, if I wanted to sell you one of those firearms, I have to go through a firearms dealer and take that gun in there, fill out the paperwork, and then they do a transfer dealer record of sale. We call it a DROS, and then that gets transferred, but then that gun is now on the books as registered. Right there.
What constitutes an infringement on the right to keep and bear arms?
Wow. Many things that the legislature does, but it's pretty broad. Now, are you doing something illegally and I take your gun? Is that an infringement of your right to keep and bear arms? No, because it's already against the law. If the legislature passed a law that all citizens that had guns must turn them in to the government entity by such and such a date, do you think that's taken place somewhere already? Oh, good answers. Very good. It's already taken place in Brazil, Australia, and the UK already for them to turn their guns in. And so that's something that blatant could be. Now, you could have a slippery slope, and they can infringe on your rights. What good are guns without bullets? But the bullets aren't covered under the Second Amendment. So that's where they kind of go around and come through the back door.
I have a freedom of arms, 22 convertible, Magnum, or long rifle short, and the belt buckle. I carry that unloaded on and it's in my belt buckle. Is that legal?
As long as your coat or T-shirt wouldn't cover it. It'd be very easy to be concealed if you were sitting down or you had it covered with your hand, concealing. So that one would be one of those iffy gray areas. If in doubt, and you can have a CCW, have a CCW. And then in that particular case, you couldn't have it loaded and be in an incorporated city as well. Way in the back right there, ma'am.
I was hoping we were going to hear about parolees to the area, maybe gang problems.
Oh, great question. Thank you, Terry. You're a lifesaver. And I'll get a quick refresh here. Parolees, we got over 1,000 parolees in Shasta County, and those are primarily people that we have prosecuted and sent to prison. Also, they can't use Shasta County or any other county as a dumping ground, but about 5% people, they use a number that could be transferred, say, from Los Angeles to Shasta County. And that is, let's say, a Los Angeles parolee for burglary has a job offer up here, and he has some family up here that can help him, and he can show that to his parole officer. They communicate with the parole office up here. They can do a transfer like that, but it's very limited on to the amount of people. While you're on parole, your parole is generally for 3 years once you get out of prison, and then you have to report to a parole officer. Sometimes you're on what they call a banked, B-A-N-K-E-D, load, which means basically you're on a big list, and the parole officer will call you every so often. Hey, Billy Bad Guy, are you being good? Well, yes, sir, I am. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And so not a whole lot of supervision there. Other parolees, they supervise a lot more, and they have to come in and submit for urine tests for drug and alcohol stuff and confirm their addresses and everything. And then the ones that are sexual predators or sexual crime violators, they have a little bit more of a leash on them, so to speak. And they want to, part of this governor's realignment under AB 109 is to realign the prisoners, and we call it the prison dump and parole dump. And they want to dump back on the counties, excuse me. That wild ride still dried me out. Yeah, it was the pit stop. They want to dump parolees and prisoners back in the counties where they came from. And that is, we call it the three nons. Non-violent, non-sexual, which means they weren't convicted of a sex crime, and non-serious, albeit it's kind of a conflict in terms. You have to have a serious crime to get to prison, but that's one of these Sacramento logic things. Right now, the governor signed AB 109, and I got a phone call last week. I thought it was a prank phone call, actually. So I'm driving down the road, headed home like at 6:30 at night, and didn't have a meeting to be to. So, and then, not that I remembered anyway. So my phone rings and it says, "Hi, this is Greg from and I'm transferring Governor Brown to you." I'm like, because I saw it came up was a 916 area code. I'm like, who? "This is Greg with the governor's office. I'm transferring him." I'm like, yeah, okay. And sure enough, it was the governor. He comes on the phone and he was talking to me and he wanted to reassure me that even though he had signed 109, that 109 didn't go into effect for the prison dump without funding. Because if they send prisoners back here, they want to transfer parole responsibilities to probation. And then anybody that's sentenced to less than 3 years would do their time at the county jail. Well, let's see, have a little bit of a problem. We closed one floor of our jail because we didn't have the budget to operate it, and it's still closed. We have about 3,500 releases we do every year because we don't have the room or the capacity. We're always at about 96% capacity, somewhere between 91 and 96% every day at the jail. So then the state says, well, we'll pay you. They have a horrible track record for saying, the check's in the mail, and nothing ever arrives in the mail. And they call them deferred payments. I just call them not paying their bill. And then they said, well, we'll give you $25,000 per inmate per stay up to a year. So if you take 25 grand, divide it by 365, that comes out to about $65 a day. But that is for their incarceration, for their medical care, which most of these people have at-risk behavior, drugs and alcohol, so they have a high medical use, for their psychiatric care, mental health, and currently if a parolee comes into the jail and he stays for 2 or 3 days and then the parole office releases him or sends him back to prison, we're reimbursed by the state for that very short-term stay of about $77 a day. So that quite doesn't add up. And we don't have all these other requirements with it, like the medical, mental health, and all that stuff. So that's a losing proposition. And the state spends, I want to say like $2.5 billion with a B dollars just on the medical care cost of their prisoners in state prison. And I want to say it's something like $60 million for parolees, getting parolees their medication, getting parolees housing, stuff like that. So that's another big responsibility dumped onto the counties at a time that they least can afford it. And so, that would be transferred into the tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for places like Los Angeles County that would have a lot of parolees and prisoners staying in the jail. So that's a bad one on parolees. Gangs. How many people think we have gangs here in Shasta County? Oh, good. A few years ago, I could ask the same crowd that question, and I'd maybe have a fourth or a third of those hands go up, and even then, it wasn't accurate. We do have gangs here. I think there's about 175 documented gang members. We don't hand out ID cards that says, hey, I'm a gang member, but there's a legal process that goes through to certify a person that they are a gang member committing so many crimes in cohorts with other people. And we have Hell's Angels here, which is, we call them OMGs. And that doesn't mean, oh my God. To the teenagers it might, but it means outlaw motorcycle gang. We have Vagos here. We have Mongols here, and that's another OMG. And they're all vying for turf here in Shasta County. And this turf is important because it's about 2 hours from Sacramento, about 2 hours from Medford. I-5 is a major corridor for trafficking. It's easy to go up and down and still do their wares of dope dealing and gun running. We have NF, which is the Notros Familia. I pronounced it wrong. We have Serenos here, which is another Hispanic gang from Southern California. We have some Asian gangs. A lot of them are coming up from Sacramento. So we have gangs, and we do try and keep a lid on it. The police department, Chief Peter Hansen and his staff, Anderson Police, and myself, years ago with Chief Modi, we formed SAGE, the Shasta Anti-Gang Enforcement. I won't forget your question over there. Gang enforcement, and we come together for a while every week. Now it's about a couple times a month just due to budget. And we go out and make what I call new best friends with gang members. And so we go out and make sure they're in compliance with their parole, probation, see what they're doing searches on their houses, and basically holding them accountable if at all possible. If we get news of a new gang forming, sometimes some of the youth start to form a gang like 530, which is an area code for up here, 275, which is up in Shasta Lake prefix for their phone number, and some others, we go out and pay them a visit and see what they're up to. Because a lot of times they have a better success rate if you're working with others to go out and commit a crime. And so gangs are a concern here. You've read in the paper recently there was a gang shooting, gang stabbing, and that's all important. When we got back to that dope dealing, we've gotten some intelligence that the Hispanic gangs, the cartels, are saying, fight it out with law enforcement or you'll be killed. And to use lethal force, whether it be for their drug smuggling or dope growing. And that's a big concern. Last year, 2010, was a deadly year for the suspects. There was like 5 fatal shootings in Sonoma, Solano, Mendocino, Napa, in marijuana gardens for the growers that were protecting those illegal crops. So that's a big concern. Right there.
The question of when you talk about parolees, and I know that Shasta County was a dumping ground for a long period of time until things got changed. But I'm under the understanding that part of the gang issue that we're having now in Shasta County is due to another program because we're a dumping ground for a lot of the group homes. That a lot of the element is coming out of LA and things through the group home program, which is actually creating a lot of the gang problem that we're having.
Good point, and partially correct. Group homes, there's private group homes, and then they contract with private individuals, parents, that send their youth, their incorrigible youth up there to get, they've called it pine tree therapy. And then there's also counties that send youth up here to group homes as well. And then there's also one of the schools up off of Oasis, North. No, not Live Oak, but Live Oak's one of them. But there's one up off Oasis Road, which is North something school, North Oasis or something like that. And they've had some problems there of incorrigible youths that have been from other areas of California that have gang influences there that influence our youth here. And then that's how they get forming some of these young gangs coming along. There's a correspondence that the chief of police has, and he's spoken about it at some group presentations. And if you haven't had Chief Peter Hansen here, great guy. I talked to Aaron a few weeks ago, and I talked to the chief, and he would like to come and present to you sometimes on issues impacting the police department in the city of Redding. But this letter was written by a gang member, and in short, it was a long letter, but in short, it basically says, encouraging all the gang members to do anything that they possibly can to better the gang, recruit people, steal stuff, deal drugs, work at recruiting prostitutes and doing prostitution, anything for the enhancement and the betterment of the gang. And that's what it's about. That's a huge one. Back when we had Chief Bob Blankenship in the 90s, gangs were a problem here and started to become a problem. They pushed back and enforced it heavily, and many other cities and counties that had gangs said, hey, you guys are doing the right thing. We laxed off a little bit, and then in the 2000s, gangs started to have their influence again, and that's when Chief Modi and then Jim Pope and others in law enforcement here, we formed SAGE, and it's basically a handshake agreement that says, hey, we're going to go out and work gang enforcement as often as we can, and we're just going to bear it upon ourselves as an agency with our budgets to push this element out of our county and city. And we've gotten a couple of grants that have helped with some overtime and some expenditures, but it's an ongoing process, and the big agencies will tell you, don't let them get a foothold, because once they're get a foothold, they're dug in, and it's very hard to get them out. Ma'am? To you.
I heard, I live over in Dana Drive, area over by Walmart, and I've lived there for about 8 years now. And I've noticed that city's taking that, not just what's been on the news, like over on Cypress, shooting over on Cypress, but I've also heard that there's some wannabe gangs up there behind Louis 14, and that there's a group from Oregon called the North Team.
Now, that's actually a big Hispanic gang, but it's probably an offshoot. Those aren't wannabe. Norteños, real Norteños are not wannabes. That's a real gang.
Okay, but I've heard there's some wannabe gangs, not behind Louis 14, but the Norteños are coming down here from Oregon, trying to recruit these people. Is that true?
I don't know if it's true. That I would not be surprised, and I don't doubt that. And you might want to have like Chief Hansen or his gang group come in and give a presentation. Norteños basically means north, and Sureños are south. But what we're seeing up here in Shasta County and some other counties as well is a blending. And generally, Hispanic gangs used to be kind of ethnicity pure. You were only going to be a Hispanic person if you're going to be in a Hispanic gang. Black gangs, Bloods and Crips, you had to be black. And then white supremacists, you could not be a person of color. And what we're seeing now with Hispanic gangs is a blending. Hey, it's okay if you're white. It's okay if you're Asian. And it's also okay if you're Hispanic. Whatever you want to do to come in to be a gang member and better our gang and better our criminal efforts. So you're seeing that a little bit more. They're becoming diversified as well. Jeff?
Yeah, as I recall, it was about 15 years ago or some period of time that Australia required all law-abiding citizens to turn in their weapons. Since that event, has the crime statistic risen or gone down?
The question was asked basically when Australia made a law that all law-abiding citizens had to turn in their guns, did crime statistics, did it go up or down? And the problem with statistics is it depends on who's computing them and how you look at them. They can be skewed. Generally, I know from reading more pro-gun websites like NRA, you go to their ILA side, you can get some information on that. Crime went up. There was another published study that said, no, that's all wet. Crime didn't go up. It went down. But I know that Australia generally says their homicides went up. It also made, criminals out of law-abiding citizens, because you go in the outback and they all have guns out there. They need them to protect themselves against wild animals and criminals out there as well, but they can't legally possess them. In Canada, even though handguns are basically outlawed, they have very high handgun crime in Toronto and Quebec. Also in the UK, firearms are outlawed, but they still have firearm crimes and homicides. Why is that? Criminals don't care about the law. They mock society's laws, and they'll take advantage of them when society has that indulgence and understanding. Basically, it'll happen. The question was, am I aware if crime has gone up or down in federal parks since the law was changed? It used to be that you couldn't have firearms or long guns in federal parks. Under President George W. Bush, he repealed that, and then you can have long guns there and handguns. Don't know. I don't have any statistical data on that. I'll get to you, Sylvia, but you?
I would love to hear your opinion on very trying to legalize the drugs that are confusing, to free you up, to stop the gang violence.
Well, here's a way that we could have no crime in the United States. Don't have any laws. And we've seen that. Sounds kind of like crazy, and it is, because I'm not purporting that. But Switzerland, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, several of the countries in Europe reduced their crime rate substantially. They basically said drugs, no crime, prostitution, no crime, and hark, crime went down. Amazing. But it doesn't mean that those things are not occurring. Those were still happening. And in fact, the Netherlands, which was pretty lenient on drugs and prostitution, they're starting to go back, and the pendulum's swinging back to where they're making drugs illegal again. Because they ended up with a society of some dopers and slackers, and seeing that. Also, crime in some countries, like Switzerland, they're pretty much a homogenous, one ethnicity country. So you don't have a mixed diversity of people and conflicts of ideas and philosophies, which can create crime as well. In Switzerland, I believe it's a mandate that every homeowner is issued a firearm, a long gun, from the government there. So, pardon me? Oh, a machine gun. Okay. Now you got to have all the ammo to go with it. But as far as the legal, because some people say prohibition didn't work. They made alcohol illegal. It made a lot of crime. It made organized crime very rich. And we still have organized crime today. Alcohol is legal. They still find it, cigarettes are legal. But does organized crime still make a profit on them? You bet, because there's a huge tax on cigarettes in New York, and so they ship them in from adjoining states where they're not taxed for black market cigarettes. California has a huge tax on alcohol. They ship in alcohol from Nevada, but it's still illegal. So there will be a way that criminals find their way around the laws. They don't care about the laws. And a lot of effort goes to there. But I was on a radio talk show a few years ago, and a caller came in and had a question similar to that. And so I said, are you proposing that we legalize heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine? And the caller said, yes. I said, okay, thank you very much for your opinion. Next caller, please. And we moved on. But no, that's not the way to do it. We have laws here in society. We have to hold criminals accountable for them. Maybe back in the 60s, having one marijuana cigarette or one marijuana seed was a felony, and some people actually went to prison for that. Was that reasonable, or maybe an overemphasis on that? Perhaps. So there has to be a balance there with the severity of the crime, so we can't just keep building prisons and warehousing people. And California is one of the largest states that have the largest population of prisoners in the United States. But there has to be a balance there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not lax on crime and not saying don't send people to prison. But it is very expensive. It costs on average, I won't forget you, it costs on average to keep a person in prison how much per year? Well, there's two correct answers. $40,000 is about the cost for an average prisoner in prison a year. $100,000 if you're a death row inmate. So whoever had that, was it you? Back there. Very good. And so it is expensive. $40,000 is about the average cost of what it costs to send a person to college for a year, like a UC or a CSU. But, and just think if we could somehow wave the magic wand and invest that money. For the people that are in prison, it won't change. But if we could invest it at the little level, at the kids, later, generationally, it'll make a difference. Ma'am, right there, you had your hand up. Her question was, do I know the recidivism rate of parolees to go out and re-violate? And California tends to have a very high recidivism rate in comparison with other states. I know a little bit. They basically say 70% of parolees will violate within the first year. of parole. And then it goes up a little bit, but most of the time they always violate, and so it's a very small percentage. Some states don't have parole. You go to prison, you do your time, you get out, and you're free until the next criminal violation. They get out a little bit earlier than their sentence because of good time, work time credits, and they become eligible for parole to get them out of prison a little bit earlier, and then they're under the supervision for 3 years. Then they're subject to warrantless search of their homes and their person, and they have to comply with laws and all that stuff. So it is a bit, but they get out. And then the other part, we talked about it when Assemblyman Nielsen was here, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. There is really no rehabilitation in prison. They don't have the programs there for them. And even I've spoken to Secretary Matt Cate. They recognize that they haven't done a great job with rehabilitation. And so generally what happens is you're a convict, your parole date comes up, you get out, and they give you your civilian clothes, and you walk out, and they hand you $200 gate money. So then when they hit the gate out of prison, they're given $200. And so if they don't have someone to pick them up, that $200 doesn't go very far. So what's usually the first thing they do? They get out, score some dope, score some alcohol, or both, probably hire a woman as a prostitute, go to a motel room, and so where's that 200 bucks? Pff, gone. So now what do they have? Nothing. So where are they going to get that next money that they need for their dope, alcohol? They'll go back to their old crime ways. If they have people pick them up, take them home, well, they go back into the same neighborhood with all their homeboys and homegirls, and right back in there to committing crime again. So it's a very vicious circle, and there aren't any easy answers for it. Right there, you haven't had one yet. I'll get you next. I've got him behind you.
What about budget a while ago? What happened to Prop $172? Are you still getting it? Has it gone up or down in the last few years?
Very good question. Proposition 172 was passed a number of years ago, and basically it allowed for 1/2 of a cent of sales tax generated on sales here in the county to come back towards public safety. We still get that, and it's divided amongst the district attorney, the probation department, and the sheriff's office. And we, the sheriff's office, we get the lion's share of it. I can't give you an exact percentage breakdown, but the Board of Supervisors last year had to dip into the savings account, and they gave all of us $2 million total, and out of that $2 million, the sheriff's office got 1.5, and the DA gets the least amount of it, then probation the second highest amount, and so that's how it's divided up.
When they gave you that the first time, did they reduce your budget to replace it with that $172, or did you get that at a discount?
The way the law was made, it was a little bit ambiguous from my understanding. When they made the law, I was probably a sergeant and didn't have my eye on the budget stuff. I was out working the streets and arresting cops, and so the budget and all that stuff was left to the administrators, them at that time. Now I am them. When it was first made, that's what it was designated not to supplant your budget, but was made to supplement it. But what happened was, generally the dollar amount went down from the county, and it was supplanted legally into the budget, and then it just becomes a mesh. There was also a law that I think was part of 172 that you have to have a something of equity standing for MOE. Basically, they have to maintain their same level of funding, but that gets kind of screwy on the way they do their calculations as well.
Unfortunately, I was in one of those administrative positions, and they just cut our operating budget by the amount of money we had coming from one.
Very mysteriously, they do that. Yes. What agency were you with, if I don't mind my asking? Yeah, and they've done that clear throughout the state. And I'm pretty sure, I can't speak for before when I was, like a sergeant when it first came in, but I'm reasonably sure that's exactly what happened. And ma'am, right there, I got time for one more question, and then I'm getting the hook to come out from Aaron. Go.
So, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but clarifying the conversation with the Honorable Governor Brown on his call to you where he was so generous and going to give you money to send somebody to go up there. Do you have any control over that? And was that something I missed as far as the percentage?
Well, he didn't say that. He said that he was not going to send them unless the funding came with them. Now, the governor we had a very good conversation. I kind of counterpointed, and I've talked to Secretary Matt Cate. He's the Secretary of the California Department of Corrections and Rehab, and that's still a big issue for chiefs and sheriffs up and down the state. Now, then it becomes, what's the definition of funding? Currently, AB 109 has $1,000 in it for remunerating counties and cities for that pushback. Well, we know how far that'll go, and it really is into the millions, if not billions of dollars. So that's what our big fight and concerns are still over. And so it's not over yet, and that's why you need to be involved, and you are involved being here. You need to be informed, and that's what you're doing here as well. And then you need to have your voice heard and either write letters or send emails to our legislators, in this case, Senator LaMalfa and Senator Nielsen. You can also send them to the chairman of the Budget Committee, and I don't know who that is right now, the Budget Committee, or the sub-chair. I think Jim is on the subcommittee, isn't he? Or the sub-chair for the committee, Budget Committee, and let those people know. There's also a committee on public safety, and you can send them emails. They don't have to be your legislator for your district. There are legislators for the state. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Aaron. I can probably stay for a while and do questions. Thank you so much for your attention. I apologize for being late. I'll get yours right afterwards, but I'll give it because otherwise Aaron's going to knock me out and then I won't be able to answer your question.
Yay! It's good to live in a county with a good sheriff. If you have a bad sheriff, you're in big trouble. Yeah. I really never knew what the sheriff did before.